Okay guys, so before we really get into the core of this video, we have to talk about the history of Sony, who is of course the owners of Spider-Man. Well, partial owners if you will. So back in the early / mid 90s, Marvel was in development of a bunch of things. Now obviously with all of this, they were on the verge of bankruptcy. And I actually covered this in my MCU retrospective part 1, which you guys can check out on the channel if you just search for it. And essentially, Marvel had to sell off a bunch of characters. Sony, in the late 90s, was one of the hottest brands in the world. Everything that could be Sony was Sony. They were printing money left and right. The debut of the PlayStation 2, one of the highest and best-selling consoles of all time, cemented them as one of the biggest juggernauts in history. With Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2, the PlayStation 2, they were pretty much unstoppable. And around 2005-ish, they started to take a lot of missteps by being like, well, we can't be defeated. Of course, they ushered in Blu-ray, but that was an expensive technology. In the long run, it would pay off, but that's when it started their big downfall. So if you look at the stock market and what happened to Sony, essentially from, let's say, starting 2000, and look at it every year to now, you're going to notice a drastic downfall to how much revenue they make per year. It is insane how much they've lost. And don't get me wrong, they're still one of the top companies in the world, but they've taken huge losses. Now, the first signs that they were in dire trouble was when they decided to sell the merchandise rights from Spider-Man back to Marvel and Disney. Now remember, Spider-Man toys and the cartoons and stuff make more money than the movie ever will. Spider-Man is the #1 hottest superhero brand in the world. He outsells everybody else. So when they did that, it was an interesting time, but you could see that they had problems. Next up, The Amazing Spider-Man. That franchise started off on the wrong foot. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, having been one of Sony's most expensive films ever, didn't go so good. It was literally a return of almost nothing worth noting, because they thought they were going to top 1 billion with that movie, just barely passing 600 million. That's a huge problem. So not even a year went by and they agreed to do the Marvel-Sony deal, which of course brought us a brand new Spider-Man into the MCU. Now don't get this wrong, they didn't do this because they heard the fans. They did this out of necessity. They had to make that deal. Another Amazing Spider-Man movie would have crushed the company. So they figure, if we're not sharing any money with Disney, no one's winning anything. All we're doing is making Spider-Man more exposable with the Avengers because they've now overtaken Spider-Man in popularity. In return, more people are willing to give us a chance. Let's do this. Now, of course, along with this, there's of course the exclusive Spider-Man game that's coming to PlayStation only. That's probably some sort of agreement that was made between them, but we don't know that yet. Which brings us to today's news. So the big news right now is that Michael Leighton has exited Sony. Now, Michael Leighton is pretty important to Sony as a whole. Essentially, since the Sony hack, Leighton has been on an uprise, investing and doing stuff with other companies such as Snapchat, and now he's out. He's on the way out, and you look at this now, and a lot of people are already wondering, what is Sony going to do now? Specifically because he was one of the big guys pushing for Sony to stick around with what they've been doing, specifically films and video games. Now, along with that, there is already speculation that Andrew House, who's of course charge of CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment, specifically he's the guy you see at all the press conferences and everything for PlayStation, is that he could be moving up. But there is some speculation here that they could actually be in a giant seismic shift for Sony as a whole, because not everybody wants to be throwing money into the films division when their most profitable division is clearly PlayStation. Now, Andrew House was also instrumental in the creation of their original programming like Powers, which was their superhero show. So a lot of people are speculating if he is going to take over this position, they're expecting a bigger push onto game-oriented content and things related to it. So things like the Spider-Man video game, more of that. More TV shows and movies based on existing Sony properties. So Uncharted, God of War, things like that, maybe Until Dawn. You could fundamentally see those become either TV series or movies in the future. Now, along with that, what would happen with Spider-Man is the big question. Now, this is where the big rumor of all of this starts, and that is the fact that if Sony sees fit, and if more people agree that gaming is going to be their main division, that this is what they should stick with, instead of sticking with all these other things, you know, like TV and failing out that, like they did with Powers, maybe, you know, gambling Spider-Man if that goes nowhere. You know, they're sitting on all these other Spider-Man spin-offs they want to do, but they can't do them because that might ruin some other plans for Spider-Man, and that's the biggest brand Sony currently owns, that they might in fact go over and sell everything to CBS. Now, this would only leave Sony with the gaming division, which is what they would want to focus on, and CBS would get the rights to everything TV, film, and yes, even the rights to Spider-Man, because those fall in under their film division. This would put Sony in a weird place, as CBS now would own the contracts, right? So what exactly would be up with Spider-Man? That's a topic I can go on for another probably 10 minutes, and this might be a separate video within itself because I really have to structure this in a certain way to try to really explain this in the simplest way possible on what would happen with Spider-Man. But if this was to happen, you could probably expect Spider-Man to get some changes in every aspect that he's coming into the movies with, but not just that, with how the character is shared and everything from there, which I'll talk about separately. But for right now, take this as a rumor, but it is being reported by a few websites out there, and it's kind of interesting how all these things are lining up with Sony that might indicate that this could be true.